14. The MoonPaths. Okay, Roxy, I guess it's up to us. Kenneth addressed the sleek black and tan long-nosed hound which sat in front of them waiting. Let's finish this thing. We don't have all day to wait around. Wagging her tail, Roxy huffed at Kenneth. She got to her feet and began sniffing around. She stopped to look at him expectantly. Oh, I get it. You need a specific command, Kenneth said. Okay, Roxy, please find the Spear of Destiny, and we will follow you to it. There. Is that good enough? He laughed softly. Roxy barked 3 times, turned, and began running down the road. Bucephalus sat off on a ground-covering brisk trot behind the hound of the hunt. The horse's ears were pricked nearly to touching, with his head up so he could see the way ahead of them. Icewing and Scold followed them. Kenneth settled in for the ride and relaxed, moving easily with the big horse. The terrain grew hilly and mostly covered with tall grass that looked like young wheat growing. Ahead the landscape rose sharply, reminding him of the Rocky Mountains that they had briefly skirted on their way to Washington State. Roxy sped up and Bucephalus increased his speed to an easy canter to stay apace with her. They approached the hills, and Kenneth could see that the road led into a series of high ridges, which rose to each side. The gap narrowed and ended in a wall with a steep footpath which snaked up the side of a sheer cliff face and vanished halfway up. Hi, hi, Roxy, Kenneth called to the hound when she turned up this narrow path. In response, she barked 3 times and started climbing. Kenneth shrugged. Follow the dog, I guess, he told Bucephalus. She seems to know where she's going. He eyed the track up the hill. This might be easier if you were a goat, though. Can you do that? Or maybe we can just fly where we need to go. For that matter, where are we? Bucephalus shook his head and snorted. They found barely enough room to walk without Kenneth's leg being dragged against the cliff face as they started upward. Bucephalus pulled the reins and put his head down so he could pick his way. His rider held the reins loosely. Kenneth gripped the saddle and his horse's mane tightly, just in case they slipped. The teen tried not to look down as they went higher, but his mount remained solid under him. When they were most of the way up the footpath, Kenneth realized that the rocks to the side and in front of them didn't look as solid. A secondary image of a moonlit path seemed imposed onto the rocks, akin to a TV screen. The light around them seemed dim. Ahead of them, Roxy looked back at them, took a step forward, and disappeared. Kenneth picked up the reins in a tight grip, but this time didn't try to yank back on his horse. Instead, he spoke to him in a firm voice. I don't know what this is, so let's assume since the dog just disappeared that we can treat this like a projected image rather than a solid something. Stay steady and walk forward slowly, 1 step at a time. We'll figure out what we've got here and how this works, he instructed the pricked ears in front of him. He nudged the dark horse's ribs lightly with his toes. Go, Kenneth commanded. The sleek stallion moved forward under Kenneth's direction and approached the solid-looking wall with the picture of a darkened path beyond it. He tentatively struck out with a hoof and didn't meet any resistance. The horse sighed and moved on forward. Immediately their surroundings went dark, and they had a brief sensation of falling. In response, Bucephalus's wings briefly snapped out and steadied them. He lit on solid ground. As their eyes adjusted, Kenneth gasped in appreciation of the beauty of this glowing path lit by the moon. The moon itself appeared extraordinarily big and close. Gently moving fog to either side of them seemed to glow with a light of its own. It had the feel of a quiet night on the lake. Normal night sounds of crickets and singing tree frogs resonated nearby. Lapping water licked at some distant shore, and he thought he could also hear faint music. Strong floral scents wafted on the slight breeze. Roxy waited for them to get their bearings and took off at a flat-out run. Beneath the riders, the horses' hooves struck sparks as they galloped at breakneck speed along the path after the dog. The surreal environment made Kenneth think of an impressionist painting. He imagined the stones being made of the moonlight itself, with their spirit selves flying high above the flat fields and mountains of the earth below. He laughed out loud and shook his head at his fanciful imagination. Roxy finally turned onto a narrower side path of dirt. She slowed slightly at a high stone archway and made a mighty leap through. Roxy disappeared again. "Keep going," Kenneth said, urging Bucephalus forward. "Don't stop. Just jump where our hound did." The stallion checked his stride slightly, collected, and did as Kenneth bade him jump over an imaginary hurdle. They came to a sliding stop behind Roxy, out in bright sunlight again. "Ah, ow! I should have brought sunglasses," Kenneth complained, and partly covered his eyes. As he blinked in the bright light, he realized that not all the heat and sparkle was coming from the sunshine. He looked around, noting the details of their new environment as he allowed his horse to cool and his breathing to relax. Kenneth patted his horse's neck and smoothed his mane. "Good job," he said. In contrast with the footing they had just left, they found themselves on flat land in a carpet of white star-shaped flowers. Beyond their position was open air, where the land dropped off abruptly. A huge white bird lazily circled on the currents high above them. Acres of solid forest filled their vision to the horizon. Curiously, there was a split in color as the trees to their left were a verdant green with white fluffy clouds sailing overhead that made shadows skirt along the landscape. By contrast, to their right the terrain was reminiscent of a winter wonderland. The trees flashed silver and sparkled like sunlight on choppy waves, yet they didn't look white. Between the two forests was a solid line of separation. They all stared at the astounding sight. "Oh, wow! That's gorgeous," Kenneth breathed. "But what's causing that? I can't tell from up here," he addressed the hound. "Where do we go next, girl?" Woofing at them, the dog turned to look out over the valley. She walked to the edge and stood sniffing the air. "That way? Okay. So, how are we supposed to get down? Do we jump? Is there another trail or some other way?" Kenneth responded. Roxy barked and pointed her nose at the bird, jumping up and down. She followed it with her eyes as it soared through the air. Kenneth quickly worked out what the black and tan hound was telling him. "Okay. I get jump and bird out of that." He smiled at the dog. "So, we fly this time?" In response, Roxy wagged her tail and barked 3 times. She looked over the edge of the bluff to the green forest and back to the bird. She sat down, panting. "So, that's not all. What else?" He thought hard. "Roxy, do the laws of physics apply here in this place?" He nodded his head when the dog barked her assent. He spoke out loud conversationally for his horse's benefit. "All right, Bucephalus, we need to watch the bird, see what the air currents are doing. Where are the drafts going? Maybe we can glide across that expanse," he said hopefully. Quietly, they watched the bird as it flew across the valley. Kenneth noticed that it tended to stay over the green forest and avoid the sparkly foliage next to it. He watched it glide smoothly and slowly circle upward like a hunting bird of prey. It folded its wings and dove down, only to snap them open a second later and catch another updraft. Kenneth smiled slightly as he analyzed the bird's flight path. "We should be fine. Oh, wait. Uh-oh." He watched the bird edge over the line that demarcated the 2 sections of forest. It suddenly wavered in the air and dropped like a stone. It struggled, flapping its wings in a desperate attempt not to crash. It barely managed to get to a point where it rose again on another thermal after it crossed back over the line. "That's not good." Kenneth bit his lip and watched for a while longer. He also noted that none of the floating clouds seemed to cross the line either. "We can't fly over the sparkly part. If we try, we'll crash badly," he said with a slight shudder. "I hate heights." Okay, Roxy, so we're flying next. What direction do we need to get? Roxy tucked her head and looked up at Kenneth with soulful eyes. She turned and pointed with her nose. The dog wagged her tail while she looked off to the right at the horizon. I see. Well, there better be a way around. I guess we'll skirt around it unless we can fly down and walk through. Is there a path, I wonder? For the first time, Roxy growled at them. Kenneth was taken aback when the dog snapped at the air and fell over at her back with her eyes closed. Plain dead. Dead. Die. What the heck is that place? Kenneth wrinkled his brow. So, evidently, we don't want to find out. This place is full of surprises and misdirection. From our position, we have to go left to go right, and if we try to go over or through the sparkles, we'll die. Did that cover it, Rox? The hound jumped to her feet and barked happily. Her blue eyes glowed and her tail wagging again. She approached her companions. Come on aboard, Roxy. Bucephalus is strong enough to carry two. Kenneth patted his leg. My lap is the best place. Bucephalus stretched to lower himself for the dog. She leaped into Kenneth's lap, and he grabbed onto her to steady her in position. This'll work, I think. Although maybe slightly awkward. Okay. If we need to stop somewhere or change direction, bark and point with your nose. 1 bark go left, 2 barks go right, and 3 barks to stop, he told the dog. Kenneth patted his horse's neck. Okay, hun. If you get tired and have to stop, you set us down away from the sparkles, whatever they are. Bucephalus nickered softly. He backed up several steps, feeling the difference in weight and balance on his back. He hunched and dropped one shoulder, and in response, Roxy moved slightly and resettled with a good grip on Kenneth's lap. The big horse extended his raven-colored wings. The 2 riders felt Bucephalus coil down into his powerful haunches and take off like a bullet, straight off the plateau. At first they dropped, but then caught an updraft, carefully circling like a hang glider. Kenneth held onto the extra neck strap and jammed his feet deep in the stirrups. He gritted his teeth and concentrated on keeping the dog steadied rather than allowing himself to look directly down. Toward the apex of the updraft, with his legs tightly tucked, Bucephalus tilted slightly over to the left to stay clear of the shiny place. Picking up momentum, he went into a long, swift glide. To maintain altitude, the horse flapped his wings between wind currents. Below them, the woodland sped by for miles. They stayed within sight of the line where the green forest ended, but didn't venture over it. Eventually, the green forest narrowed, and Kenneth realized that Bucephalus's wing beats seemed to be slowing. He looked for a possible landing site, paying attention to the land features below. Soon, a small lake caught his eye. It appeared to have a clearing in the narrow strip with enough room to land. A waterfall with a sunlit rainbow fed the lake. He couldn't see an outlet. Roxy noticed too and barked 3 times. Is this a safe spot for a rest? The teen asked the dog as Roxy worked her nose and wagged her tail. Good. He tapped Bucephalus, and when the horse flicked an ear back, he pointed to the clearing. Down! He shouted above the wind whistling by. Bucephalus slowly circled down, and back-winged to stop their momentum just above the ground next to the water's edge. Roxy jumped off while Bucephalus was landing. She noisily lapped the clear water. Kenneth slid off his horse and plopped down. The horse daintily sniffed the water hesitantly. Kenneth realized what Bucephalus was about to do. He jumped up and grabbed his horse's head. No, he said firmly. Roxy is from this side of the separation between here and home. She can eat and drink from sources here. If you drink the water or even eat one blade of grass, you're stuck, he told him. I think, though, that you can probably cool off with no ill effects, as long as you don't swallow any. Let me get our gear off of you. I have an energy bar in the pack and a flask of water. Both are from home. Scold insisted I pack a little extra for you. Kenneth offered his horse some clean water and an energy bar. He then unbuckled the girth and unhooked the straps to remove the saddle and bridle. He dropped their gear on dry land and watched his companion enjoy the water. Bucephalus waded into the lake. He folded his wings and rolled in the water, carefully not submerging his head. He came up snorting and shaking the wet from his glossy hide. Kenneth marveled at how easily those enormous wings could just be made to disappear like they weren't there. Yet impossibly, they were. A prickle up Kenneth's spine was the first indication that the three of them were no longer alone. He felt someone watching them. Bucephalus's head came up with his ears pricked to alertness. The horse reared and in three splashing leaps stood dripping by Kenneth's side. Bucephalus nudged his rider when the boy stood up and tried to see what his mount could hear and smell. Roxy sat beside them, looking in the same direction as the horse. Her blue eyes glowed, and her tail wagged so hard her rear end shook. An armed trio stepped out of the shadows wearing light armor suitable for fighting and quick movement. The warriors blended well with their surroundings in their dark green, brown, and gray attire. It almost appeared as if part of the forest separated from the tree line and walked toward them. They carried bows and long, slender swords. "You are here without invitation." Tall and slender, with blond hair and an exotic tilt to his smooth features, the leader addressed the human. His pointy elven ears showed through his long hair when he turned to speak to one of his companions. "They have a hound of the hunt with them." He frowned and turned his face back to look at Kenneth. "State your allegiance," the elf challenged. "Killing keeps them quiet for a little while, but they always come back." Vincent Kovich lay back on another motel bed, watching a cockroach crawl across the ceiling. A half-empty bottle of vodka and a pile of white powder cluttered the nightstand beside him. His last kill had been just hours ago, but there was already a rising murmur in the back of his head. A throbbing migraine made colorful spots dance in front of his eyes. Whispers in his head grew stronger, and he raised his hand to wipe his face, trying to push away the voices. It didn't work. It never worked. "Shut up! Shut up!" Vincent snarled. He stood up and punched the wall behind the bed. The peeling plaster looked like a face laughing at him. He punched the image again in the nose and felt something in his hand snap. The disheveled man grabbed his hand and howled in pain. Sinking to his knees beside the bed, he sobbed as someone on the other side of the wall pounded back. Faintly, Vincent heard someone shouting over his crying, "You shut up!" Laughing, like a hyena's bark, sounded in his head. All he could smell was rot and blood. Although he had showered hours ago, when he sniffed himself, he could still smell it, almost like the scent itself had crawled up his nose unbidden. He rose and washed his hands. Steam rose from the sink as he turned the water on as hot as it would go. It didn't help. His hands shook as he clawed at the skin of his fingers until the water took on a pink tinge. "It's not funny!" He screamed at the voice. It kept laughing. "You know," a different silky, smooth voice told him, "you can make him shut up. All it would take is a little more blood." "I bet that guy in the next room has money. You could get more drugs," a rough-hewn female voice suggested. "Eh, just have another stiff drink, mate. You'll be dandy." This one had a pronounced English accent. "Start a fire, burn it down. You have a lighter? Make it burn," another one said. "The guy next door has a pretty daughter. You could get another girlfriend," a deep voice wheedled. The last one whispered an unending litany of names and places. As it spoke, images flashed through his head. Each one was more horrible than the last. Scenes of wanton horror and torture sent him to his knees again, gripping his thinning hair and pulling it. If clawing his own eyes out would work, he would have done it. Vincent looked up and blinked several times through his blurry vision. True blackness stirred above him in the mirror. He imagined a giant panther stalking him, and two flame gold eyes peered through the glass into his soul. The hyena that had been laughing non-stop for hours abruptly shut up, and he reeled as the empty spot in his head made him dizzy. He rose to his feet as the blackness oozed through the mirror onto the sink, leaving the glass intact. Two paws with razor-sharp claws gripped the sides of the sink and pulled the rest of the darkness through the mirror. "Oh, what?" Vincent stuttered through his alcohol and drug-induced haze. This was far from his first hallucination, but it was most definitely the clearest. "Mine," the giant panther said simply. "I am here." Tiamori watched as the other demoni scattered in panic. One of them stopped and hissed at him. This one, the cat pounced and swatted. Taking the hint, the other demoni left Tiamori alone with Vincent. The voices mercifully stopped. "Shadow!" Vincent exclaimed. "My kitty! You're okay!" Tiamori turned and considered the man. His tail flipped for a moment, and Vincent watched him jump up onto the bed. Tiamori sniffed Vincent's scent and wrinkled his nose. Regret, thick and cloying, permeated the man's psychic scent, but so did denial and refusal of responsibility. Vincent still believed that he hadn't done anything wrong, and he was the victim. Vincent continued. "My shadow, I thought you were dead. I thought Kyle drowned you in the pond behind the house. I was 12, remember? I can't believe you found me again. You always did chase the nightmares away." The man sat down on the bed beside the cat and reached out to pet him. Tiamori didn't move except for his tail tip flipping slightly. He began to purr audibly and subtly manipulated the man's energy to dull the effect of the drugs. As Vincent ran his hand down the mussed, spiky fur of the black cat beside him, he dropped his shoulders, worked his neck a bit, and sighed. The lingering migraine he'd had for months was easing. He spoke conversationally to his cat. "I've been lonely since you've been gone, Shadow. That bastard Kyle tormented me for years after you left." He continued to pet his furry companion. "It'll be better now. He can't hurt us anymore. He drowned in the pond." Vincent smiled, remembering the day they'd dragged the pond for the bully's body. "We're safe now. Just the two of us." Vincent leaned over and slid his arms around Tiamori's shoulders. He began to cry inconsolably as he held the black cat close. The cat, in turn, gently put his chin on Vincent's shoulder, nuzzling his cold nose up to the man's neck. They stayed like that until Vincent cried himself to sleep. Tiamori didn't move. While the man touched him, the spirit pulled apart his memories and sifted them. He ate the dark energy of his rage, selfishness, and hate until clarity beckoned in Vincent's mind. "Give it all to me," Shadow whispered to him gently. "You can tell me everything. I am here." Tiamori purred until he judged Vincent was ready to awaken with a clear mind, and the spirit was full of dark sustenance. The purring stopped. When Vincent awoke, the only emotion he had left was deep, profound sorrow. He sat up and felt the most alive that he had in years. He looked at the cat still sitting on his bed. "You aren't Shadow, are you?" "No," Tiamori replied simply. His deep, calm voice resonated smoothly in Vincent's head, as well as his ears. It contained no feeling of threat. "Why didn't you kill me?" Vincent wanted to know. "I have done horrible things." "Yes," Tiamori agreed. "You killed and lied and stole. You want to be safe. But no one is safe with you, he said gently. Vincent cringed, despite the lack of judgment in the cat's eyes. He heard scratching at the door. A sound like ice creaking heralded cracks that spread across the face of the mirror. I cannot keep your demons at bay forever. Even now they howl at your door, Tiamori told the man calmly. You have a choice to make. When you cast one daemon out, 7 return. You will shortly have the legions of hell on your tail. Because I'm a killer, Vincent responded. No, Tiamori told him. Because you let them in. He turned to look at the drugs, and Vincent's gaze followed the direction of the cat's view. And because you failed to take responsibility for your choices. One single daemon rode you for the first murder. The rest were of your own free will. Tiamori let his bright gold eyes draw Vincent's full attention. He projected horror. He showed him the fear, the pain, and the desperation of his victims as each one died by Vincent's hand. Nowhere is safe, Tiamori whispered. What will you do? He crept closer until he was but inches from the man's face, and the cat could smell the stale alcohol still on the man's breath. Choose. Mirrored in the spirit's eyes, Vincent saw clearly the monster he had become. He then understood that he could go on as before. He could seek redemption from a priest and turn himself in, or he could end it all in this lousy motel room. He considered his options. It's too late. They're on me. I won't be able to leave, he told his companion. God will never forgive me for what I've done. They are coming. Tiamori's gaze seemed to bore into Vincent's cold heart. Cracks spider-webbed up the walls under the pressure of the demoni trying to enter. In response, Vincent looked around for a weapon. The only thing he could see was a partly empty glass bottle. Taking the vodka by the neck, Vincent smashed it against the face of the wall. With precision born of practice, he turned to face the mirror and dispassionately watched himself slice his own throat open. His body went down, and in just a few minutes, he stopped twitching. Tiamori was still standing over the man's cooling, blood-splattered body when the horde of demoni broke in from multiple directions. They snarled and spat when they saw the death sprawled on the floor. There were mere scraps of emotional energy still floating in the air. Furious that their meal had been stolen, the demoni launched themselves on Tiamori. He disappeared beneath the seething mass of teeth and claws. He fought back furiously, and as their bodies began to pile up, some of their fellows broke off to feed on the fallen. More arrived, and Tiamori realized he was too overwhelmed to escape. Something large grabbed him from behind and yanked his head back. He saw a hellhound coming at his throat. He'd seen a hellhound rip a much larger demon practically in half to yank out their core and devour them. Tiamori tore the back of his neck out of the other daemon's grip and twisted so that the hellhound's pounce took the other daemon off his back. With no time left to waste and no retreat, Tiamori did what he had sworn to himself he would never do. He jumped free just long enough to call his only ally. Kibachet! Tiamori backed up against the corner to make it easier to defend himself. He raised his spiked fur like a porcupine's quills to make himself look larger and more ferocious. In response to the call sent out on the threads of connection that Kibachet had placed on the panther-like spirit, she touched Tiamori's mind. She read him and saw his desperate predicament. She growled in fury. His life is mine, not yours, demoni. A bright tear formed in the middle of the darkened hotel room. Kibachet came out of the rift in full armor. She grabbed Tiamori by the neck, and he yowled in pain as her fingers slid into the grooves left by the daemon's teeth. He found himself hurled bodily through the rift to plop awkwardly in the garden of Anubis's temple. His nose landed on a gold-clad foot. Tiamori winced and looked upward. "Well, then," Anubis sounded amused. "I see you got yourself into a larger brawl than you could handle. Stay here until Kibachet can deal with you herself." Anubis turned back to the garden scrying pool and watched his daughter. Kibachet snapped her fingers, and the rift closed. She planted her spear quickly on the floor and threw up a dome shield around the room. The demoni stopped fighting among themselves and jumped around like a pack of trapped rats looking for a path to escape. Central to the moving mass, Kibachet called upon her ability to wield flame and set herself. The demoni and the room ablaze with blue fire. The evil creatures trapped in the inferno crisped and died. Later, investigators would blame an electrical fire for the damage done to the hotel. When his dental records identified Vincent's burned body, young girls all over the Northwest breathed a sigh of relief. "Nicely done." Anubis nodded. He turned and spoke to the panting cat. "All are dead. You won't have any more foes on your back trail." "There should not have been so many," Tiamori replied. "I cast out 7, and I expected them to return with reinforcements and promises of feeding. But I have never seen so many gather in one place that quickly in the mortal realm." Kibachet, who returned while the spirit was speaking overhead. "I agree. We have a problem." She addressed Anubis and the cat. "There are far more than the usual weak spots and tears in the veil. I believe when the Spear of Chaos was brought to this side, it weakened the barriers between worlds." Anubis's normal, scary-looking face looked even grimmer. "We will see many more incursions if this is the case. We will need to call on my sister and brother to help close the holes. I will go talk to Bast and Set. I will also send a message to the High Court through Archangel Gabriel. This may get bad enough that we have to involve the angels." "Father, I will take the Spirit of Sorrow and go hunting. His tracking skills may help us find the source of the weakness. If it is the Spear in truth, we will endeavor to find it." Kibachet looked at Tiamori, who lay on his side resting. The Lady of Cooling Water walked over to Tiamori. "I can't heal you. It's unfortunate, but I would do more damage to you if I dared to attempt it. How seriously hurt are you?" Tiamori rose to his feet and turned so Kibachet could examine the wounds on his neck. "That is pretty deep. Did you feed?" she asked him. The cat dropped his head and refused to look at her. He knew it would do no good to lie to a power, so he answered her truthfully. "Yes, I caused the death of a human." "Did you offer him a choice?" She raised an eyebrow. "I did offer him a choice. He chose death," Tiamori answered. "The terms of our agreement, Cat, is that you would not take the life of an innocent. The man you speak of was not innocent, and you did not kill him directly. You did, however, push the rules. We both know that since sorrow is your method of attack to feed, and sorrow is what you are called, you can still be held to account for suicide," she told him firmly. "Your redemption is on the line. See to it that you do not carelessly repeat the action, Tears of Sorrow. For now, you balance the scales by preventing more deaths." Tiamori sat up straighter. "Redemption? Surely this is not possible for one like me." He looked at Kibachet's back as she walked away. She didn't stop to explain. Tiamori silently thought on her words as he trailed her out to the MoonPaths to track and hunt. Once they reached the MoonPaths, Tiamori quickly took the lead. Kibachet shapeshifted into her large cat form, where she was able to stay apace with her companion. Together they quested for the tears and weaknesses that would indicate the passage of darkness. Kenneth carefully regarded what appeared to be three elves facing his own small team at the side of the lake. Several possible answers came to mind as the newcomers faced him. So far, they had been polite and unthreatening, he reasoned, and they thought of his place as theirs. He settled for telling the truth. My allegiance, as always, is to the Most High God. We have a mission to find and claim the artifact called the Spear of Destiny, so we can use it to destroy Loki's weapon, which is said to be able to destroy everything on Earth and in heaven. It is not here, the lead elf stated. Kenneth nodded. Please, pardon us. We are passing through from where we were to where we are going. I wasn't aware of this territory being yours, Kenneth replied. He thought back to the rules of conduct he'd read that applied to encounters with the High Fae. It wouldn't do to be careless. We could not pass over the Silver Forest, so this was the only possible route. You were seen flying over our realm. At least that part of your story is true. I was sent to investigate. What is your name? The elf asked. Kenneth smiled as he was aware of the trap set. My friends call me Ken. Well met, elf. He bowed slightly, staying polite. The elf also smiled, noting the neat dodge of the question. He considered the boy, the horse, and the dog. Well met in return. He inclined his head. I see no threat here. As you are accompanied by Odin's hound, I believe you. Therefore I shall allow you passage. You may drink the water here. It is pure and will not cause you undue delay. However, I don't suggest eating anything. Your horse may find the grass not to her liking. Her liking? Kenneth grinned. Nice catch. Our kind have true seeing. We know what is underneath the illusions presented to us. She is very beautiful, the elf said. You also are very bright to my senses. Not sure how to respond to that, Kenneth settled for more pleasantries and simple communication. I appreciate your candor. We will take only what we need and no more. We will be on our way quickly. Make it so. The elf responded with a slightly deeper bow and moved away from them. Soon the warriors faded back into the forest. Kenneth knew that the elves were still watching. He would do the same under the circumstances if the situation were reversed. Okay, girl, get your stallion ass over there and get a good drink. I know you're still thirsty, he told his horse in an amused tone. I believe the elf told us the truth. Just don't try the grass, okay? While Bucephalus waded back in and took deep swallows of water, Kenneth drank some of the cool water himself. He waited a few minutes, and feeling no ill effects, he refilled their flasks. All right, an unexpected boost and a blessing. I'll take it, Kenneth remarked. He glanced around at the beauty of the peaceful setting and noticed its cleanliness. The elves know how to take care of their lands. There's no litter or anything to mar the looks of the place or poison their water supply. Kenneth shook his head. Too bad humans don't do as well. They worry about climate change and ignore the elephant in the room. Roxy woofed at Kenneth as he scraped the water off the horse's hide with his hands. There's no scraper, so this will have to make do, the teen said gently to Bucephalus. We don't have time to dry you properly. Roxy's getting impatient to go. Soon Kenneth mounted, and with the hound not asking to come back aboard, they followed her on foot. After leaving the clearing, they found a forest road that took them in the direction they were going. Roxy sniffed the air as she trotted along, but stayed on the road. Bucephalus was comfortable with the brisk pace and the surface. He moved quickly and settled into a ground-covering gait. Eventually the green forest ended in a grassy plain, and the road continued at the edge of the silver forest. When the road curved toward the silver trees, Kenneth finally got a good look at the barrier they had been avoiding. Wow! He exclaimed to Bucephalus. The trees look like metal growing out of the ground. Those leaves look razor-sharp, too. Eyeing the forest floor, he saw why the forest sparkled so much from above. Each leaf edge appeared as if it had been carefully forged and sharpened on a lathe to a razor-thin cutting blade. The edges caught the light, and when the wind blew, it knocked the leaves together. It sounded like the tinkling of many bells. Kenneth was astounded. Did those actually grow that way? It was impossible, yet there it was. Looking down on the path near one of Bucephalus's hooves, he saw one of the blade-like leaves. "Hold there, Bucephal. I want to examine a leaf." Bucephalus stopped and stood ready for his rider to dismount. Carefully picking it up, he realized it was stiff and felt cold like metal. Drawing it flat and lengthwise down his forearm, he also realized it cut his arm hair with precision. "Ah, I bet I could shave with this," Kenneth said. "I think I'll keep it for now." He wrapped the sharp leaf in a spare cloth from the saddle pack and placed it carefully where nothing would rub against it or cut anything. He took a last look around and they moved on while watching carefully for fallen leaves that might cut their feet. He noticed further details as they went. Kenneth eventually realized that the Forest of Razors, as he'd begun to think of it, was home to small creatures that seemed unbothered by the blade-like leaves. Further into the woods, a large predator roared. He was relieved when the road curved away from the dangerous forest, and Roxy sped up the pace. When a meandering river blocked their way, Roxy stopped. Kenneth drew up beside the hound and halted. The road abruptly ended at the river's edge. It was too wide to jump. Tall grasses, topped with heads heavy with seed, waved to either side under a bright blue sky. Extending quite a distance, the grass was home to what looked like grazing horses and buffalo. Snow-capped rocky peaks rose beyond the plain. A light breeze brushed his face and played with his hair as he talked to his canine guide. "Are we supposed to swim across?" The hound growled and tucked her head. "No? Another danger I don't perceive?" Kenneth asked. Roxy barked and wagged her tail, tucking her head again. The otherworldly blue light in her eyes faded to plain brown, and she sat down in the road. "No again." The teen considered. "I missed something." Another affirmative bark. He suddenly realized the landscape appeared to him in tones of gray. Gone were the holographic colors and halos. Wait. This all looks very normal. Did you lose the trail and bring us out on the Earth? "Ah, crap." Kenneth responded to her tail thumping the road. "Well, if you lost the trail, we're not close to our destination. We need to get you back to where you can pick up the trail again. So it's up to me. Hold on and let me think."